I'm Stephen Jones, and I'm the President and CEO of Flair Airlines. And we're here today to discuss the Cta Review. But before we get into that, I wanted to make just three things really clear. The first thing I want to make clear is that Flair Airlines is here to stay. Canadians can continue to book incredibly affordable airfares with confidence. The second point I want to make is that the May 3rd deadline that's been widely reported in the media is not a drop-dead date. May 3rd is simply the date by which Flair needs to respond to the CTA on the concerns that they've raised in their preliminary determination. There is zero chance that Flair will lose its license on May the 3rd. And the third point I wanted to make really clearly up front is that Flair is here to provide affordable air travel to all Canadians. Canadians have paid too much for too long, and I think everyone on this call knows the reason why. Let's just call it big air. So, before getting into the detail of the review, I wanted to just remind everyone on the call of who Flair Airlines is and why it exists today. Flair Airlines is Canada's third largest airline, and it exists to bring affordable travel to all Canadians. Because for too long, Canadian aviation has been dominated by two carriers. As a result of that duopoly, Canadians have been paying too much for air travel. Everyone on this call knows that, but it shouldn't be a fact of life. It should not cost $800 to fly one way on a 2-hour flight within Canada. It should not be cheaper to fly to Europe than to fly within our country. That's just wrong. But that's the current Canadian reality due to a lack of real competition in the market. The lockdown of Canadian consumers had been happening long before COVID-19. The government recognises this and has explicitly created an environment where ultra-low-cost carriers can grow and thrive. As a result, Flair is here to help free Canadians from the burden of high airfares and to make their lives more affordable and to help connect them with the people and places that they love. We're creating thousands of direct and indirect jobs in communities across this country while we're at it. So a quick overview of Flair Airlines. Flair Airlines is a Canadian airline, full stop. With a fleet of 14 aircraft today and growing to 20 aircraft by the summer, Flair, as I said, is Canada's third largest airline. Flair currently has 650 flights per week on sale to 20 cities in Canada, from Comox in Victoria in the west to Deer Lake, Halifax, St. John's, Charlottetown in the east, and many large and small cities in between. Flair employs 772 people directly today. That's pilots, flight attendants, and support staff. And additionally, more than 1,300 indirectly employed at airports and maintenance bases around Canada, for a total of more than 2,000 jobs created already. This will grow to more than 4,000 jobs to be created by the time Flair reaches 50 aircraft in 2025. In 2022, Flair will provide nearly 4 million affordable flights to Canadians from all walks of life. We're focused on the budget-sensitive Canadian who couldn't dream of affording air travel under the old big air regime. When comparing the cost of flying those 4 million flights on Flair versus the fares on the same routes with the legacy incumbent airlines, Flair will save Canadian travellers in excess of $200 million in 2022 alone. On top of those direct savings, the presence of Flair in the Canadian market has forced the competition to react by lowering their prices to a reasonable level. We call this the Flair effect. Have a look online today at the airfares available across the board within domestic Canada and compare those to what you used to pay pre-pandemic to the duopoly. Flair is delivering on its purpose to make air travel affordable for all Canadians. I want to turn now to the matter of the CTA review process and start by clarifying the nature of the process, as it appears that there are mixed levels of understanding. To hold a scheduled passenger license in Canada, airlines must be demonstrably owned and controlled by Canadians. Compliance is measured against 3 tests, and airlines must be able to demonstrate that they are continuously in compliance with all 3 tests. The first test is the airline's place of incorporation. Where is the company registered? We passed this test as we were incorporated in BC, Canada. The second test is that a majority, i.e. greater than 50% of the voting shares in the airline must be owned by Canadians. No single non-Canadian can own more than 25% of the airline, and non-Canadians in aggregate cannot own more than 49%. We passed this test because 58% of the voting shares in Flair are owned by Canadians, and no non-Canadian owns more than 25% of Flair Airlines. The third test is known as the control and fact test, and this is a subjective test. There's no hard, bright line test for control and fact. It's important to note here that the CTA does not need to find that control is being exerted by non-Canadians. Rather, it simply tests for whether control could be by looking at the entire set of relationships that the airline has with non-Canadians. Now, I would note that the CTA allows and accepts some degree of influence by non-Canadians over the affairs of an airline. Indeed, the CTA accepts that non-Canadians are entitled to take steps to protect the value of their investment. To rise to control in fact, the influence exerted by a non-Canadian must be dominant and determining in nature. As noted earlier, the CTA process is a continuous one, with the CTA asking questions of the airlines and forming a view on compliance. If the CTA staff cannot be certain that an airline is compliant, then it refers the matter to a panel of 2 knowledgeable members who review the case and make a preliminary determination. Flair's review was referred to the panel, and the panel made its preliminary determination on March the 3rd. So it's under the control and fact test that in its preliminary determination, the CTA raised concerns regarding the requirements within Flair's governing documents to ensure that Canadian control of decision-making is maintained. In particular, the CTA called out the depth of Flair's relationship with 777 partners, one of our shareholders, creditors, and aircraft lessors. In its preliminary determination, the CTA outlined its concerns in great detail and gave Flair 60 days to respond to those concerns. The 60-day deadline to respond is May the 3rd. Again, this is not a drop-dead date to have all the issues fixed. It is simply the date by which we must respond to the CTA. Flair will meet this May 3rd deadline for providing its response to the CTA. Following May the 3rd, the CTA will follow up with Flair on its response and further steps. This is an iterative process. So, what were the issues raised by the CTA? The CTA issues can be broadly grouped into 2 categories. The first is corporate governance, and the second is corporate finance. And I'll discuss both of those issues in turn. The corporate governance issues. This is the area where the CTA preliminary determination raised the majority of its issues, and so I'm going to take a little bit of time to explain this. One of the primary governing documents for Flair Airlines is its unanimous shareholders agreement, and it is in this document where the requirement for Canadians to demonstrably be in control of the company at all times needs to be maintained. All of Flair's shareholders are party to this document, and it impacts decision-making and the rights of shareholders. The Unanimous Shareholders Agreement sets out such things as the right to appoint directors, the appointment of the chair, the composition of the board subcommittees, the appointment of the chair of those subcommittees, and numerous other items of corporate governance. The CTA preliminary determination came to the view that the Unanimous Shareholders Agreement did not enforce Canadian control explicitly enough. The CTA listed the specific areas where its concerns lay. Flair Airlines has accepted that the document, which was originally created in 2018, needed revisions to clarify that Flair's affairs are controlled by Canadians. In consultation with the CTA, Flair made amendments to the Unanimous Shareholders Agreement. The CTA has confirmed to Flair that these amendments address all of the corporate governance concerns that it has raised. This amended Unanimous Shareholders Agreement was put to all shareholders for their ratification last week, and I'm very pleased to announce that this week shareholders have overwhelmingly voted to ratify the agreement and that this new modified agreement is effective immediately. The new Flair Airlines Board of Directors will increase from 5 directors to 9, of which only 2 will be non-Canadian. Key amongst the changes were the reduction of the 777 partners' right to appoint directors. Whereas 777 formerly had the right to appoint 3 directors, this has been reduced to a right to appoint 2 directors. This is in line with the rights of other major shareholders. So, following this reconstitution of the board, there will be 2 non-Canadians and 7 Canadians for a total of 9 board members. The amendments also included the removal of numerous veto rights that 777 partners held but never exercised. 777 partners wholeheartedly supported the changes, and this amended unanimous shareholders agreement will form part of Flair's response to the CTA on May the 3rd. So moving now to the corporate finance issues. These issues are threefold. Firstly, the provision of day-to-day cash funding of Flair from 777 partners. Secondly, the level of long-term debt owed by Flair to 777 partners. And thirdly, the leasing of aircraft. On the day-to-day cash funding of 777 partners, this was required by Flair during COVID to ensure the survival of the airline and the protection of jobs and connectivity for all Canadians. As we stand here today, Flair is strongly cash self-generating and is projecting significant cash surpluses to build over the strong summer period. We are no longer dependent on 777 partners for day-to-day cash needs. And I will say, as the CEO of this company, 777 partners never used the fact that they were providing us cash to exert day-to-day control. As CEO, I run Flair Airlines along with my management team and the more than 700 people working hard every day for Flair. With regard to the long-term debt, I don't need to tell any of you how brutal COVID-19 was to the airline industry. It was no different for Flair. Beyond some Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy support, much needed support relied upon by businesses across the country, and some regional air transport initiative support for continuing to grow regional connectivity, Flair was not part of the billions in bailout funding that was provided to Air Canada and the other large carriers that ultimately the Canadian taxpayer paid for. Instead, we turned to our shareholders to survive, and 777 partners provided a lifeline to protect thousands of jobs from coast to coast and to ensure that Flair could continue to fulfill our mission to bring affordable travel to all Canadians. It's a priority for us to repay the debt, and we intend to repay it through a combination of continuing to run a successful, profitable airline, seeking alternate pre-IPO refinancing of the loans, and ultimately listing Flair on the Toronto Stock Exchange and raising capital for growth. Flair has already successfully refinanced nearly $80 million of its debt to 777 partners, but the refinancing of the balance of our debt will take some time, however, and it is for this reason alone that we have sought a time-bound 18-month exemption from the Ministry of Transport. As it relates to aircraft leases, as I said earlier, Flair has 14 aircraft operating today. 6 are leased from 777 partners. The rest are leased through third-party leasing companies based in Ireland and the USA. Leasing is a very common practice in the airline world. Virtually all leases to Canadian airlines come from specialised non-Canadian lessors. For example, Air Canada just announced the leasing of 14 new aircraft from US-based Air Lease Corporation. The CTA has stated that leases from foreign lessors do not in and of themselves give rise to control and fact issues. Flair's leases are all made on arm's length and market terms. The CTA has copies of all of our leases and has not raised issues with them. So to summarise my introductory remarks, Flair will continue to fly. Flair's customers can continue to book our everyday low fares with confidence. Flair will respond to the CTA on May the 3rd. Flair will have addressed all of the corporate governance related issues by that date and will include the amended unanimous shareholders agreement as part of our response. Flair is now cash self-sufficient. Flair does have outstanding debt as a consequence of COVID-19, but this debt is less than the level of bailout provided by the federal government to Air Canada, Sunwing, Porter, Transat and others. Flair has already refinanced a significant portion of its COVID-related long-term debt, and Flair is seeking time to refinance the balance of the debt and has a clear plan to do so. Flair is confident that these steps will address the remaining concerns of the CTA. Flair is here for the long term and will deliver affordable travel to all Canadians in the future. More than 4 million customer journeys will be made by Canadians on Flair this year, saving consumers in excess of $200 million, money that will flow through the entire Canadian economy, creating jobs and restoring low-cost connectivity across this great country.
Yes, thank you for taking my questions. The region of Waterloo International Airport this morning just held a grand opening of the domestic arrivals terminal with Flair Air as the main guest. With only 18 months in planning from the ground up with this building and 9 months of construction, was this possible issue known before this expansion was started? And what would you like to say to strengthen the trust with the residents of Waterloo region that this expansion was not made in vain?
Absolutely, it wasn't, and I think it just shows the spark of economic activity that comes from low-cost travel. So we are there to stay for the region of Waterloo and the YKF airport. We have got a great relationship with them. I think the investment, $44 million going into the terminal expansion and the facilities expansion there is an incredibly wise and far-sighted investment by the region. It's not a huge amount of money in the context of the billions of dollars that get spent on airports around the country and around the world, but it's a very smart and I'd say incisive investment. Already $90.1 million worth of economic activity has been generated in the region. So you're getting already a 2-for-1 return on that investment, the jobs that are being created. So we've got 150 people directly employed in our business in the Kitchener-Waterloo region. Talking to Chris Wood and the team there the other day, the expansion that's going on is generating a lot of jobs in his team, and also just economic activity through the businesses that are located in the region. So I think very, very wise investment, and we look forward to continuing to grow our business there.
Thank you for your answer. Now, I've spoken to dozens of people who have flown into the region of Waterloo International Airport, who have said they've been delayed from their departure location, as well as the hundreds of complaints on social media about the same issue, with difficulties reaching the call center, on hold for multiple hours, and then just dropping off the line. What is your response to this, and what would you like to say to those who are still waiting for their either refunds or compensation for being delayed for a long period at a time?
So firstly, I would apologise to all of those people for whom our operation has let down, and I acknowledge that it's been less than 100% perfect. I think there's an industry-wide shortage of staff, and a lot of in particular the on-ground staff. And so there's some industry issues, but there's also issues that Flair has had, which I would describe as growing pains. We are very aware of them. We've been beefing up our customer service responses. We've gone from having 10 people in that department to more than 70, introducing much more automated technologies around customer response and speeding up our refund timings. We're the ones that gave refunds during COVID. Remember, these other big guys wanted to just keep the money from the passengers. The only way they were going to give refunds is if it was a condition of a government bailout. So Flair has consistently given refunds, and I get 3 or 4 or 5 emails a day directly to me of customers, and I'm responding away to those. So it's an ongoing process. I don't claim that we're perfect, but I apologize to those people who we have disappointed, and our only job is every day to make the business better.
Hi there. Thank you for taking my question. I wanted to follow up on something that Robert had said. Just to clarify, did your airline know about this possible regulatory issue before the investment in the region of Waterloo Airport, or after?
No, so we knew about the issues when we got the preliminary determination on March the 3rd. Obviously, we've been in process with the CTA continuously, because this is a continuous process by its nature. And so we've been exchanging information with them backwards and forwards. But until we got the preliminary determination on March the 3rd that said, hey, we think there might be an issue here, we were just still in the process. As soon as we got the preliminary determination, we analysed what all the elements of the issues are. We focused in on the corporate governance issues. We've solved all of those. On May the 3rd, we will respond and we will go back through it. So it's a continuous process that, as I said, came to us on March the 3rd in its preliminary determination.